Hi, I'm Carol Hall, and I'm a composer lyricist, and I'm on my way to interview Tom Jones, who is the book writing, lyric writing half of the writing team of Tom Jones and Harvey Schmidt. Tom and Harvey have been writing musicals for over 50 years. That's 5-0. And last month, I interviewed Harvey, the composing half of the team, at his home in Texas. He used to live in New York, but now he has retired to Tomball, Texas. One of the reasons that I'm very interested in the work of Tom and Harvey is because they've always been completely original. You would never, ever confuse their work with that of anybody else writing for Broadway or Off-Broadway. And it's been exciting to watch because they really march to their own drum. They don't adhere to any Broadway rules of writing. On a personal level, I too am from Texas. And when I was much younger, I knew that Tom and Harvey had gone from Texas to New York and written musicals, which was what I wanted to do too. So they stand for a lot of us who had the same aspirations. Harvey, I am so happy to be here. I mean, there are several things that are really incredible for me. One is meeting you, and the other is that I'm in Tomball, Texas.
I know.
And I'm an Abilene, Texas girl, so this has been a joy.
Well, we've heard of Abilene, but very few have heard of Tomball.
Where did you grow up? Tell me about your early years.
I come from, on both sides of the family, were German Texas farmers, and they were huge families. I had 12 original brothers and sisters of my mother on her side and 12 on my father's side. So our reunions, and at Christmas, we'd all gather at Christmas and go to both places. And it was just a wonderful background. They were all very musical, too.
I heard or read that you said that when you were little, you would listen to Toscanini playing on the radio and you were doing art while you did that, and that you were enchanted with the sound. Is that right?
Yes. My whole life was art and music always together. And when my mother first tried to start teaching me, because I was already picking out any melody I'd hear with one finger. I'd run the piano and pick it out. And so they thought they better start trying to teach me. And but the minute I was at the piano, and my mother would have those traditional books, you know, Bob runs here, Jill goes there, and things.
Yes.
And the minute I'd hear it, I'd just play with one finger. Then I'd run away, and I'd always run away and sit on the floor and draw. There was always the combination of both things. Then they made me conductor of the rhythm band there too when I was about 6. I just remember my fabulous costume and remembering just to go like that, you know.
Well, it held you in good stead. You found out.
Yes, they thought I did a good job, so.
I love hearing about your mama. I love hearing about the music that she brought you because it seems like it was church music.
Yeah.
You were hearing church music, you were hearing radio music.
Yes, and the other big influence was films at that time. My mother loved Nelson Eddy and Jeanette MacDonald, so I saw every one of their films at one time or another. And as a result, I got very familiar with operetta music.
Tom, I've heard Harvey talk about growing up in Texas and his singing family and the fact that he was kind of already blending his art with his theater. What were you doing in Texas?
I was practicing to be the biggest misfit in Coleman, Texas, and an achievement which I managed. I was mimetic, you know, pathetically mimetic, but I was like, I could copy and imitate radio things. I was really skinny, and I was really had a bad self-image, and my way of winning any kind of acceptance was not through football, which was the thing there, but being able to like remember things from radio shows or do things or perform or do whatever.
Did it work? Did it work in a football camp?
Yeah, it actually did. And eventually, they became used to me, I think. It's sort of like the drought. It was like my presence. When I was a senior in high school in Coleman, Texas, a town of about 6,000 people, and I wore a sailor straw hat to school. I carried a cane. I smoked a pipe.
Amazing.
And I wore
you're still
a bow tie.
alive.
And yes, and I've signed all of my papers, T. Collins Jones, Esquire. And yes, you're right. It's lucky I wasn't stomped to
I think
death.
it
But I
speaks
mean,
about-
I was sort of accepted. And
It speaks very well for you that you managed to survive by not playing, but even though you didn't play football.
I wanted to be an actor, even though I didn't know anything about acting. We didn't have any theater, except there was briefly a local little theater group. And if you can believe this is one of the weirdest things of all time. They did a production of Our Town, and at age 12, I played the stage manager, and everybody else was an adult.
What
Talk
a
about
unique
a
take.
major breakthrough.
I always hoped we'd move to one of these little towns where they teach drama or music.
So you knew you wanted to be an artist. That was...
Yes, and I would see ads about going to art school in Chicago or New York. There were certain big art schools at that time that charged a lot of money. But I knew I wouldn't be able to afford it. I knew I couldn't do music because I knew I couldn't read or write it, either one. I was still playing by ear. And believe it or not, at that time I could only play on white keys. I never knew what those hideous clusters were, those intrusive things, 2 black, 3 black, 2. No one ever told me, and I didn't care because I didn't want to touch them.
Mama didn't tell you?
No, I may have asked her, but she sloughed it off too. And I could play any melody I could hear.
Have you come to know the black ones now?
Yes, but that was part of the great thing of going to the university. I always say that everyone should go to the university if they can, but you never know what you're going to learn. What I learned was how to play in other keys.
When I went to the University of Texas, it was like the world opened up. There were other people as crazy as I was, And I couldn't believe it. And then
I think you wrote that everything's been downhill since you graduated from the
well,
University of Texas.
that's what, in terms of musicals, that's what our cohorts there, our
But you were
fellows.
big stars there.
Well, I was an actor, and I was pretty good, but I got awfully nervous, really terribly nervous, and I gave up acting to become a director. And I thought, geez, what a breakthrough. Instead of being nervous, you could just tell other people, oh, would you do that again, please? And, better and all that, So I was head of an organization called the Curtain Club.
On all these trees at the university, they would have these things advertising a thing called the Curtain Club. It said if you were interested in set design or poster design or playing the piano, they listed all these things which I'd done privately in all my high school years. Somebody wanted someone who could do these things, and they needed a pianist, so I got in.
One of the things we did was Hipsy Boo, which was a review of popular songs from 1900 to 1950.
And you directed it?
No, Word Baker. After that, I got a job directing a big annual college musical. So I called Harvey Schmidt, who had written this wonderful song, Hipsy Boo, and that was our first work together.
And it was an even bigger hit than Hipsy Boo.
I see.
People standing on the rain against. We liked that.
But, we had no intention of being writers or
You were
musical
still going to be
writers.
a director.
Yes, right.
And he's
Harvey
an
was
artist.
an illustrator, an artist. But the response to it was so hot. The communication that you just couldn't forget about it. And so I went into the Army. They finally got me. I've been dodging the draft for years. And in the Korean War, my number came up.
But when you were in the service, what I just can't get over is when Harvey says that you were writing songs by
Yes, and I was in for a year before Harvey went in. And I was in Baltimore, in the Counterintelligence Corps. countering intelligence wherever it reared its ugly head, which wasn't too often in the Army.
But you were writing
And
songs
Harvey was
by mail.
out painting latrine signs in Fort Bliss in El Paso.
He would send me lyrics, and luckily I had in my Army career had worked out where I was in charge of this big theater that would show films twice a day. And I would set Tom's lyrics to music and send them back. I'd get Army buddies, and one of them had a girlfriend who sang quite well. And then we'd put them down and send them to Tom so he could hear what they sounded like.
We wrote songs and
Send them back and forth.
and
Would you send him a
so-called
lyric
comedy.
first?
Yeah, all this time was always lyric first, because we didn't know there was another way. I didn't, and I don't think Harvey did.
What were you listening to? You must have been listening to musicals.
Not that much. My real influence always was Shakespeare. I mean, that's, and it is now. That's always been the thing that resonates in my. That's the dream, is to be able to write to use these same conventions that are in musicals, to write. They're the same conventions that were in Shakespeare's time, really. And
As in?
the main thing, the bottom line is, you don't begin by pretending it's reality. You begin by admitting it's a theatrical presentation of reality, and then you find your reality within that.
Right.
So that being so, it means you can have direct address to the audience, like soliloquies or like songs.
Right.
It means that you can have language that isn't pretending to be literally realistic. It's iambic pentameter. It's often very skillfully and very consciously rhymed at particular places. Scenes are ended over and over in Shakespeare with a rhyming couplet to get you off the stage.
Okay, now you all have finished college.
Yes.
You're in the service, and then we came to New York. So you're starting on what later became, what?
Well, we tried. We had this idea of doing something based on this Rostand play, which I had learned about from Mr. Payne. Mr. Payne had done a version in 1909 in London called The Fantasticks.
Tom asked if I would be interested. I said, well, I can't, my art career was really taking off at that time. And I said, I can't really do it unless I can do it full time. I decided to take off a year from my art career at that point, even though I was
To do
doing
the show?
Yeah, just to
Oh my
write
goodness,
the
that's
show.
really, that's something.
Well, Tom
'Cause you're
says that
doing
too.
well.
He actually gives me credit for that sometime when he's talking about it.
And then Ward Baker had a job directing 3 one-act
That's correct.
plays. You had a chance, if you finished the musical, right? Which you hadn't
Yeah, but
done,
we
to
had
do it at the
bogged
bar.
down at that point. It had gotten bigger and bigger. And I always saw it at the Winter Garden Theater. Instead of 2 neighboring backyards, I saw it as 2 neighboring ranches in the Southwest, and where everybody was on real horseback, real horses on the stage. Shows you how naive I actually still was.
We tried to make it a musical in the like Rodgers and Hammerstein mode, big Broadway musical, 2 adjoining ranches, and it was called Joy Comes to Dead Horse. And somehow that wasn't
that
getting
sounds
off the ground. And word came to us. He said, "Look, if you guys can take that thing you've been working on all this time and make it into a long one-act in 3 weeks, I'll give you a production 3 weeks after that." So we said, we can do it. We threw out almost everything we had except the song Try to Remember, and we threw out all of this other stuff, and we just decided, I had this passion for this presentational theater, the theater of Shakespeare and Thornton Wilder, Brecht, the Greek, and thought, nobody's ever going to do this damn thing anyway. I decided to write almost all of it in verse, either open or, like Shakespeare, choosing the places to use rhymed couplets. I took something I'd just learned about Shakespeare, that he uses a tapestry of concept of images in each play, subtly underneath it, to cohere the thing, to pull it together. I decided to try that with images of vegetation and growth. And then, you know, it was those things that you dream of when you're writing and you don't know where it's coming from. You're looking and you think, my God, what? Wow, where is that coming from? You know, so that then it happened, and that was the basis of the Fantasticks. And interesting, you know, I talk about things happening spontaneously,
Right.
but the other trick as a writer, if it doesn't happen spontaneously, you have to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my own feeling about writing is that you just plug away in a very, I loved the process myself, but it kind of like you sit down and you go at it and you go at it, and then you wait for those moments when it happens and you don't know where it comes from. If it never happens that way, then I question whether you're actually a writer. If you're not ever surprised by the way it comes out.
Can we talk about Try to Remember?
Yes.
Because, you know, not only is it the best-known song of all time, but for me, looking at it, I tried to discern what you did, and I can't unlock its secret.
Well, we had a song called Come On Along With Me.
Come on along with me, follow along with me, back to a world that is easy and slow. Follow along with me, follow the song with me. Let's go see how it was long ago. We'll go riding down the chalky canyon of a dream, floating beneath the rippling blueness of a phantom stream. Let's go back beyond the smart of you, back to that special childlike part of you, back where your dreams are fancy free. Follow along, follow the song with me. We kind of liked it, and I liked the lyrics very much, but it was all quasi-operatic, and I thought not inviting enough. And I used to work for NBC graphics and television, and I would sometimes walk down from the RCA building to Steinway Hall on 57th Street, which when they first built the building there, they had these wonderful, huge rehearsal rooms that you could rent, and they all had old, magnificent Steinway pianos in them. So on the way home, I would stop there and work on music sometimes.
They let you just come in and...
Oh, no, you had to rent it
Oh.
for a lot of money. So I was working on something very vulgar and cacophonous and brutal in every way, because I was kind of working off steam from NBC, too. So I had on my suit and tie, and I was wringing wet after just pounding away on this very cacophonous thing for a long, long time. And I just was wringing wet, and I just was so depressed. I was depressed playing it just then. And first I just sat there, too tired to go on. Then I realized I was paying a lot of money for this Steinway studio, and I better keep playing whatever happened. So just for a change of pace, then I didn't know what I was playing even. I just started playing. I thought it was written by someone else and that we all knew it. I thought it was Streets of Laredo, you know. I didn't know Streets of Laredo that well, obviously, but anyway, I just kept on playing it. And then at the apartment, I started playing there, and Tom heard it one day and came in and said, "What is that melody you keep playing?"
I heard him playing this tune, this melody, which was I'm trying to remember, and I thought, God, that is so wonderful. That's so evocative. Maybe we could use that instead. We hadn't ever really written songs. That was the first song we ever wrote. I think it was music first. And so I thought, well, how can I break this open? And the clue for me, listening to it over and over and over again, was that in between the choruses, this little thing, da 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 da. I thought that could be follow, 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 like follow along with me.
Right.
It could still serve as the same
invocation.
So that was the clue. I thought, well, if it's that, and that music, try to remember. If you're going to follow, try to remember. And if you do try to remember, kind of September. Normally, you would have thought it would, and I would have thought it would be spring they would be talking about.
Right.
But again, we were lucky. We were lucky how this fallen, but it had those beats. And if you have September, I guarantee you, as sure as God made little green apples, you're going to wind up with December.
Right.
I mean, it's everybody always will. But then I decided, like, since the tune was this beautiful, simple folk tune kind of feeling, I would like to try to make the lyrics more complex and do a lot of assonance and a lot of near rhymes and kind of surprise rhymes.
That's it. That's what really kills me about it. It's when you get into fellow.
Yeah, and then in the course of things, the song helped open it all up for us, because having started with September and you wind up with December, then it says at the end, deep in December, it's nice to remember, although you know the snow will follow. Deep in December, it's nice to remember, without a hurt, the heart is hollow, and so forth. So we began to clarify our structure of this coming of age thing that we wanted.
Of what it's about.
Of what it's
began
about.
To appear.
And that became then clearly that's what it's about. Over time, I came to realize that in the structuring a musical, there are three things that you have to deal with. One is, and the hardest very often, is to know what it's about. The second is the plot, which is, a plot. We understand what that is.
Right.
And the third is the style of presentation. And it just so happened that in the Fantasticks, without knowing that was happening, we knew...
You had those three things.
The center of it is this seasonal change, using vegetation images and so forth, but it's without a hurt, the heart is hollow. For me, it's John Barleycorn. It's like death and rebirth. And it becomes very explicit at the end when El Gallo says, the boy and girl sitting on either side of the platform, he comes standing, forming a triptych. And he says, there is a curious paradox that no one can explain. Who understands the secret of the reaping of the grain? Who understands why spring is born out of winter's laboring pain, or why we all must die a bit before we grow again? This is a very primal message underneath what is a fun spoof of Romeo and Juliet. So those three elements are there. We had the things I described before, the presentational elements, the fact that we're going to do it in a theatrical way. And so they all came together.
Let's go back for a minute. You're the one-act musical, and when you finish that, you have offers from 3 producers.
Yes, and we didn't know any of them.
You didn't know any of them.
And but we went with Laurie Noto.
Why?
Well, for one thing, he appeared in an immaculate summer white suit and a straw hat. He looked so debonair. He was an actor before. He also came with a lawyer. We didn't know anybody with a lawyer. And Laurie just right off said, I want to produce this. But he said, I will only produce it if I can do it as 2 acts. He said, this will not have any life as a 1-act musical. So then we took it from this very big, collapsing enormity down to this 1-act version. And then, because of Laurie, expanded it out to a smaller second act. The night it opened was so... we thought it would be, because we loved the cast. They were wonderful. Jerry Orbach, Kenneth Nelson, and Rita Gardner.
I saw it. I'm proud to say.
And had a fabulous musical director, Julian Stein.
But now, it says somewhere in one of your interviews that I read that there was actual discussion of closing it that night.
Oh, yeah. The people
Why
in the
was that?
business, there were some tough, really Broadway people there. And they said, you know, if you close the show tonight, you won't have to pay the actors for the rest of the week. But if you run it, and Laurie said, no, he said, I'm planning to run it. I've always planned to. And he had always told us he would had his life savings put aside. And because we still thought he was some kind of very rich person.
It was a straw hat and a lawyer. Yeah.
But his life savings were like $1,200, I think. He had always put that aside, that knowing he was going to do this show, and that would keep the show over the first weeks, which he said it won't do well for a while. And that was exactly the way it turned out.
And how do you explain it? Do you think people just told people? Whoever
Very
was
much
there.
so. Yes.
That's what I think. I was
Right
calling
away,
up
no,
people.
we can vouch for that, because right away, Cheryl Crawford saw it and immediately started calling people to come down and see it. And one of our biggest supporters was Anne Bancroft, who at that time had made a big smash on Broadway in The Miracle Worker. And she came over and over again and brought people. The people that sensed the specialness of it were what kept it running, really. And they were mostly theater people. I mean, you'd look out some nights and it would be Richard Rodgers and Vivian Lee. Only like 5 or 6 people, but they were all big names.
That's something.
And so the word of mouth in the theater community was very good.
Right. Tom, I'm really excited to talk about 110 in the Shade because, given what you just said...
Because we're both from Texas and we know what drought is like.
That's right. And you said about 110 in the Shade, which was a musical version of N. Richard Nash's The Rainmaker.
The Rainmaker, yes.
You said the play is about drought. Drought is about the sun. And then I love what happened out of that.
Well, I mean, when we got the chance to write it, Richard asked us if we would like to work on it. And we said, give us time to see if we can figure out, for our purposes, how to break it open.
I had gone back at this point to doing freelance artwork again for magazines. And Sports Illustrated, that I did several big assignments for, had called one morning. They wanted to know if I would be interested in going to Iran. The Shah of Iran, who was still in power, was going to do a major lion hunt up in the mountains. So they wanted me to do a series of paintings based on that. And I thought,
go with them and do a series.
And stay over there for a month and do paintings.
You in the Shah.
Yes. So I was thrilled by that. In the afternoon, I got the call about converting The Rainmaker into a Broadway musical. We hadn't done a Broadway musical yet. And I thought, my God, I can't not accept that.
And he had to decide at that point between the Broadway show or going on the tiger hunt with the Shah of Iran. So he chose to do the Broadway show. And from that point on, he began to drift more and more out of the commercial art world.
So then we met Richard Nash, liked very much talking to him about it. And he seemed very positive about us working on it. And so in creating the score for that, he would come over every few days and we'd play for him whenever we had 2 or 3 things we wanted him to hear. We usually always write 2 or 3 songs for the same spot. We don't put our all hopes on one thing because sometimes you can top yourself and you just feel better about it, feel more secure. And
That's
particularly when you had Richard Nash along, because he knew what was right for that property in every way.
The play, which is a wonderful play, but it's very much trapped into a realistic, even though the language is very often flowery and spectacular and poetic. it's trapped inside. There's not a scene outside. There's inside the house, there's inside the tack room. And it's my feeling that musicals, generally speaking, although there are exceptions to everything, work better if they flow from one thing to another. So we thought, how can we break out of these interiors? And then that led to the thing you just said.
The sun.
It's about drought, and the drought is about the sun. Then we had this vision, Harvey and I, of the structure, because one of the main things in a musical is to know where you break the acts, or if you break the acts, or whatever.
Right.
But we follow with the rising of the sun, singing about drought, and we follow the sun in the course of Act One as it gets hotter and hotter and hotter, and the play gets more intense and hotter and hotter and hotter until it has this big climactic moment at the end. In our version of Act One, she runs away. She'd been told by her brother that she's going to be an old maid, and she runs out, and we clear the stage in our vision, and we have this, having started with the sunrise, we have this flaming red sunset with her standing center stage in a white dress, and she sings the song about Old Maid, ending with, "Oh God, don't let me live and die alone." That image taken directly from the end of the first half of Gone with the Wind, when Scarlett, in her white dress, holds the turnips up against a blazing red sunset, says, "As God is my witness, I'll never be hungry again."
Oh, my word.
And,
I didn't get that. That's great.
And then we thought, well, okay, that's very clear. That's very neat. Rising the sun to the setting of the sun, Act One, and then everything beautiful happens at night. It's just the exact opposite of the Fantasticks. The Fantasticks says Act One takes place in the moonlight, Act Two takes place in the sun. So we were being very clever and just borrowing the same idea and reversing it. But it gave a structure.
Is Harvey, as yet, doing the drawings about these?
Well, for him, things are so visual that he wanted to do paintings, drawings.
I did them in color and following the path of the sun all day. I did it just so I could keep track of things. It helps me, because I am an artist, to really think of the music in a certain way too. And I just have always done it for myself.
I keep seeing the kid painting his art back in Texas while listening to Toscanini.
That's right. Believe me, that's the way everything has always worked for me.
That is so exciting.
Even when I'm doing a telephone conversation, I'm drawing the whole time. And one of these days, I want to publish a book called Telephone Drawings.
Oh.
Because a lot of them have to do with our shows.
To talk about in 110 in the Shade is that you have said that you came across this device that you've used several times since of two songs sung by two people who are opposed in some form or another. And so I wanted you to tell about Melisande juxtaposed with Simple Little Things. Yeah.
So much, not just they're juxtaposed, but they even join together because when he sings this whole vision, Melisande, all this romantic, colorful things, she answers it with a very simple song, Simple Little Things, all I want is it. And at the end, she sings, it's the name Lizzie, it's enough. She sings, Lizzie, Lizzie, and he sings, Melisande. And she says, Simple Little Things. So they really are joined together to make one unit.
We go to I Do, which is, I mean, despite the fact that you had gone from your off-Broadway success to Broadway success, it's interesting to me that your Broadway success is still following the Jones-Schmidt pattern, which is of totally unexpected, oddball ideas for what will make a musical.
Well, I mean, I will have to say that wasn't our idea in any way. Gower called, Gower had said, "You want to work with me?" And I said, "I'd like to," and we said, "Yes, we would like to." He said, "Okay, look, he had an option on a book by Bimmelmans called The Street Where the Heart Lies." And he said, I just want you to understand, I am a dictator, but I am benevolent. He said, if you work with me, you have to agree that every final decision will be made by me. And you can protest and you can put your side, and I may vary, but he said, I'm the final arbiter. And we agreed to that and honored it. But at least it was very clear and very fair.
So one day the phone rang, and it was Garrett Champion. He was in David Merrick's office. He said, forget that other thing I asked y'all to work on. He said, what would you think about, he said, I'm here talking to David. And he has this idea of turning the four-poster into a musical.
Which was a two-character play about
Yes.
20 years of a marriage.
Yeah, initially, when he said it, just a horrible idea. We were both on two different phones.
Had
And
anybody ever done a two-character musical?
I'm not aware that they had it. Like the idea of doing a big Broadway. He said, we want it to be big. We want it with a full orchestra, and but with two superstars. And Merrick had said the ideal couple would be Mary Martin and Robert Preston. And so we immediately changed our minds about that. We thought this would be great.
Again, same thing we said to Dick Nash. We don't want to sign on. We don't want any guarantees. We don't want any advances. We don't want, even if we work and we lose all our work, even if you steal our ideas, we want to take some time on our own to see if we can grasp the structure and the problems, and then decide whether we will do it.
I think that's great.
Great or crazy. It may be crazy.
Both, maybe.
Sometimes we've been royally screwed, but not in this instance.
Now tell about the research that you did for the song that's called Nobody's Perfect.
I got my wife to make a list of my most irritating habits, and I made a list of hers, and made that into a little vaudeville.
So all that list in there, Nobody's Perfect, they go back and forth.
It's wonderful. It's a wonderful story.
And those are real things.
You know, I love talking about craft. It's nothing I love more. And one of the things that I have to say here is that this is your book called Making Musicals by Tom Jones, an informal introduction to the world of musical theater. But everything that we've been talking about today is in this
Yes,
book.
yes. I mean, anything I know about musicals is pretty much in that book in a fairly
phenomenal.
compressed and I think pretty much readable form.
It is. I feel like I would
Comprehensible.
be a much better writer if I'd had it about 20 years
Me
ago.
too.
Yes,
Me too.
Yeah.
Increasingly over the years, I found that I did some of my best writing away from the piano.
Really?
You know, when you sit at the piano all the time, you tend to use the same chords and
Right.
your fingers.
So what do you do? If you hear it in your head, do you notate it?
Now
Do you hum
I
it?
do it by tape recorder.
You do?
When this first started, people don't realize how recent these little tape recorders are. Like I wrote Soon It's Gonna Rain in my head in Mexico, and I didn't have any way of copying it then, but I just remembered
You
it.
remembered it.
Yeah. So if I like something and I can put it down in a rough version, because I still can't read or write music. So then I develop it at
So
home.
you'll do the piano
Yeah,
first.
I'll be totally surprised what is made up of it. It's stuff I've never played before, very often.
If you have, say, a sad song versus a comedy song to write, do you get into a mood? Do you think in an intellectual way about what's required of that character's?
It's very often that kind of thing may be something Tom has been very specific about. So I'll follow exactly what he put down lyrically. And but if I'm just doing it on my own for a spot, which that happens sometime, then I'll just go out for one of my walks and get something going in my head, knowing what's needed for that spot. We always, with every show, lay out every beat of the show musically, what ideally, that's what we start with.
Right, before you start.
Yeah. And so you try to fulfill that either sometime lyrics first, sometime music first, and sometime we work at the piano together, which is not too often, but we usually end up fighting when we do
And
that.
then do you cross-pollinate? I mean, that you give him half of a melody and he
Yeah.
he fills that in and then it helps you continue on?
Yeah. What's really interesting, not too many years ago, we read this interview in the New York Times with Lerner and Lowe saying they always started with the title of a song first. And it frees both parties that way. If you get a title like that Tom is going to enjoy writing about or something. And also musically, if there's a theme that I like so far, and they can still be changed and intertwined, but it's very helpful.
One quick question. How do you handle critical advice from people other than Tom? I'm presuming that you and Tom can say, no, that's not right, or yes, that's fine. But with other people, like, say, producers or directors who come in and respond to a song and have
it
critical
depends.
advice.
Like the first time we were having the orchestra reading, which Church K did, of 110 The Shade. And we were having in this room in Boston, and we played one or two songs, and suddenly David Merrick stood up and said, I hate this. Oh, no. He said, I'm bringing Phil Lang in. He said, Phil Lang puts melody in every song. And he said, I thought this show would have a lot of those follows in it, just going back to Fantasticks.
That's this David Merrick, right?
Yes.
Was this portrait made?
Yeah, it was in color in Esquire. But that's
I was just going to say, I thought perhaps the darkness reflected.
Well, one day he
moment.
found out in my apartment that I'd done it. Richard Nash just happened to mention it. He said, you drew that? He said, I hated that picture. He said, I'm not going to do this show,
I love that. I think that's the man that said, I thought there would be a more follow.
But I love David Merrick. I mean, we did these two big Broadway shows.
Okay, so moving on to Portfolio, which is one of my favorite parts of your life. I find Portfolio an extraordinarily brave period, because there you were with enormous success downtown, and you could have gone on forever doing just big, fat Broadway shows. And so what do? You buy a building. No, you didn't buy it.
I wish we had bought it. I wish we had bought it. We rented it.
You tell. You rent
Well,
this
no, we
building.
rented a building in the theater district on 47th Street. It had a 2-story ceiling on the first floor, so that we were able to build Harvey designed a modified Elizabethan stage, which we used for all kinds of things.
The purpose was
To try just to develop everything on our own, direct it, write it, and Tom asked me to design the costumes and the sets and everything.
original material created by yourselves,
Yeah.
not based on previous works.
And our
necessarily.
workshop things, which is a weekly thing, some of these things grew into the shows we were writing. And this had a balcony at the back where I had all these instruments that I could play myself, just hit and strike.
But you were creating new work.
Oh,
and
all
nobody
new.
was paying you to do it.
That's
no one
right.
was commissioning you.
And we were going to be the directors, and we were going to be the designers, and we were going to be the producers, and everything else too. This is called hubris.
I guess so, but it's also called a workshop, and they didn't even have them in those
No,
days.
that's right. It's right.
One thing I loved about that period was Tom entrusted me to just do whatever I wanted to do. He had always admired my artwork, and I could do any art things I wanted to do, or any musical thing I wanted to do. And it was a coming together of all that thing I'd been doing my whole life, art and music all tied up together.
And what did you do? You did Celebration. It got an Outer Circle Critics Award.
Yes, and the Celebration, it's wonderful things, and it's a terrific score, and some great scenes, and structurally.
But it is revolutionary, based on a Sumerian ritual.
Yes, right. But as I said in the thing, with laughs and a few naked girls. I mean, it really seriously was an attempt to combine what Peter Brook, who was our hero, called the Holy Theater, the theater of myth and religion, with the theater of the street, the theater of clowns and strippers and, fart jokes.
Sounds like a hit to me. And then what
And
happened? You
life is
moved
so-
it, right? Didn't you do it a couple of times?
Well, we should have done it off-Broadway, really. But we're part
But
of
didn't people come and sort of throw money at you and say,
Well,
we're
they
going to
did.
take
They
it to
did. They wanted, because we had had nothing but success, and so we did it in a Broadway environment, and it was pretty viciously received. Yes.
So now Uptown, years later, you've got something everybody loves. They take it immediately to Broadway, and it's not treated well there.
No, I mean.
And yet people are still doing it now, Tom.
Oh, I have some wonderful pictures on my computer I just got from Japan. I've been working on it. I never stop like rust. I never stop working on them,
And you have other things from Portfolio. You have Philemon.
Philemon, that's got the best notices of anything we ever did in New York. But it's really pushing the edge of the envelope. One thing in the latter work that we were doing, that was a major breakthrough. If you begin, and we carried it on, we did it in Grover's Corners, We did it in Colette. For me, it became an image that I got at one point from a production of Jerome Robbins did of Les Noces, the Stravinsky piece, in which he had this platform and they had like 7 pianos around and a chorus standing on the thing, and these dancers would come and do in this hot center. And I became obsessed with this idea of the hot center where things take place, but you always have the other people around. That's always been sort of implied in our work, you know? But it became specific. And once you do that, like in Colette, you have her in the center at her desk, and you have all the memories of her life, but they can talk and they can also sing as a chorus, not just as themselves. It makes possible for a lot of expansion within compression.
Right, right.
Colette is one of my favorites, and people. And Colette, why we did this, I'll tell you. Colette, when she was very old, somebody asked her, Madam Colette, if you could look back over your whole life and keep part of it and throw part of it away, what would you keep and what would you throw away? And she said, I'd keep it all. It's my property, my goods. And that was very meaningful for me, because what it meant, as I take it, is that, you know, people want to feel good, but they don't want to feel bad. And it doesn't work that way. To the exact same degree that you feel good, you will also feel bad. The question is how much you open yourself to feel. And many people, perhaps most, because of the pain of the bad feeling, won't. They don't. But Colette said, bring it on, you know, I want it all. It's my property. And then if she had been in a musical, which in fact eventually she was, she would say, to know is joy, to feel is joy, to experience it all is joy. The good and the bad, the living and the dying, to hear each melody is joy. There is such wonder here on earth, such beauty and such pain. So many melodies, and I want to sing them all of them are joy. And that's the image.